This is Alice Austen's house, where I'm having my exhibition Bittersweet. My name is Arlene Gottfried, and I welcome you to join me and see the photographs. The museum is open Thursday through Sunday from noon to 5 p.m. You'll be greeted by Carl Rutberg, the director, and Paul Moakley, the curator of the exhibition.
Hey, my name is Carl Rutberg. I'm the executive director of the Alice Austen House. Welcome. You are now standing in what used to be an old Dutch farmhouse. The floors and beams here date back to 1690, which makes the Alice Austen House one of the oldest in New York. It was once known as the first house because it was the first house that immigrants saw as they sailed up the Hudson. In 1844, Alice Austen's grandfather bought the house and rebuilt it into the Victorian Gothic cottage that you see here today. And in 1866, his granddaughter, Alice Austen, was born a few blocks away. Alice, at the early age of 11, in 1877, received a camera from her seafaring uncle, Captain Oswald, who had bought it in Germany. And as she received it as a gift, she immediately took to this new invention, and she immediately started to explore this new way of expressing herself, this new way of looking, and thus she became one of America's earliest and most prolific female photographers. Over the course of the following 50, 60 years, she took some 8,000 images. Most of them glass plates. She used to take her bike and bike to the ferry with a backpack with all of her photography, all of her photographic equipment. She took the ferry into Manhattan. She took her bike, rode around. She would find interesting buildings, characters. She would command them to stop, and she would take their image. Of course, with glass plates, it was a complicated process. She would take out the glass plate, put some motion on it, fluid on it, into the camera, focus, take the photo, take it off in the backpack, back to Staten Island, develop it, and so on and so forth. So it is far from our modern digital cameras. Alice Austen, what makes her so interesting and why we keep being fascinated by her is that she's a multi-layered character. There's much to her. She was the first woman on Staten Island to own her own car. She was a master tennis player. She was the founder of the Staten Island Garden Club and a master gardener. She brought pugs to America and loved her dogs. And as far as her photographic talents and skills, they are not only shown in her street photography but also in her nature work. She was very interested in transcendentalism, the idea that man and nature is one, that the soul and beauty flows from man, nature, almost effortlessly. And once you start to look at her photos, and we have a couple of hundreds here, you tend to be sitting for a couple of hours.
Hi, I'm standing in front of Alice Austen's house, and I remember the first time I came here was in 1978, which is 30 years ago, with some other women who were photographers also, and we were first trying to bring attention to Alice's house and her photography. At the time, the house was abandoned and there was a hippie family living in it. And that's why I really feel so honored to be able to exhibit my pictures here, because of the connection many years ago that began. I guess that's when it began, and then wound up with my exhibition here. I'd like you to see the river, the beautiful view from the house.
It is because of this multi-layered and because of this complexity that we are so pleased to have Arlene Gottfried in our galleries. We think that Arlene, if not an Alice Austen, she's a modern interpretation of Alice Austen. Like Alice, she's also fascinated of everyday life. Like Alice, she brings her camera wherever she goes. Like Alice, she sees things that some of us do not. She sees things that some of us passes by. But once she has captured it, once she shows us to us, then we cannot help looking at it. And I know Arlene will take you around and look at her images, and they are a delight to look at, and we're very happy to have her here. So I know that you worked for a long time with our curator, Paul Moakley, selecting photographs. How many photographs were you looking at, do you think?
Well, we got a little bit of a late start when actually Paul approached me about showing here, and I agreed to do it. And it was also in connection with the publication of my most recent book, Sometimes Overwhelming, which is the black and white work that I've done from the 1970s and 80s in New York. And that was an opportunity to combine Sometimes Overwhelming with the color street photography that we decided to call Bittersweet. The title was because, you look at the people, and even though there's that sense of this humanity and there's a warmth and humor a lot of the time, also life is not always easy. So these are the things a lot of the time that I'm drawn to when I make photographs of people on the street. And sometimes, as you'll see in some of them, there are no people, but it's something that symbolizes life, a storefront or a detail.
If you walked around New York today, would you be able to take the same photos?
Not the same. Life is different, even though some of the photographs go through the 90s and into, the 21st century. New York doesn't look the same. I still think I'm drawn to many similar types of people, but it's a different city.
Now, why did you even start taking photographs?
Well, actually what's surprising is that my uncle passed and left a camera to our family, a small 35mm camera. And when I decided to take a photo course, just because I didn't want to sit still in a classroom anymore, and I thought, well, if it's a photography class, you have to do something other than just sit and listen and do homework. So my father knew that, he had the camera that belonged to my uncle, and he gave me the camera. And I went outside. I just instinctively went out, and I saw my friends, I saw people in the neighborhood, and that's what I photographed. And
were you ever interested in still life, or more composed, or was it always reality or real life? Or?
The real life photographs is what I did for myself, but I did actually have a job at one point in an advertising agency. That came about, and I worked 4x5 still life and 8x10. And it was a very good experience because you had to photograph everything. It wasn't just being, in one niche and doing one type of picture.
Now, I think you took more than that one first class, am I right?
Then I went on. I took the course there, and I thought, well, I didn't know what else I was going to study, so I kept on. And I took a 2-year course at Fashion Institute. It was affordable for us at my family at the time, and myself, I could work a job and go to the school, and it was a very practical photography. They didn't get into a lot of art and theory, and so the rest I kind of figured out on my own.
Great. Alice Austen grew up as a wealthy, at least well-off lady. She was not Vanderbilt, but she certainly never had to worry about money. In 1929, that however changed. The stock market crashed, wiped her out, and Alice and her companion Gertrude Tate had to do whatever they could to survive. For a while they had a little tea salon here. Gertrude taught dance lessons, but as the 1940s came out, they had run out of money and Alice was forced out of her house. One day simply a van came up and the bank announced that the house was foreclosed and she needed to get out. They took her to a poorhouse, and not a retirement home, which one might think, but a poorhouse out of a Dickens novel with naked light bulbs and bunk beds out of metal. And there she lingered for 2 years until someone came up to her, a man named Jenkins, who had found her photographs. And he started to show some of the images that she had taken, and as he showed her these images, her mind started going. Her gears clicked back into motion. She started to remembering and talking, and she discussed her images. Jenkins was then able to sell a few of them to Time and Life magazine, and that earned Alice Austen enough money to move out of the poorhouse and into a decent retirement home, where she died in 1952.
Alice's house, Clear Comfort, is now a National Historic Landmark and also a park, part of the New York City Parks Department. But I remember years ago there was a horse in the house next door, in the garden of the house next door. And that's what kind of a country atmosphere it has, why I gravitate towards Alice's house.
Yeah.
This is a photograph of my mother saying goodbye to my grandmother. It was kind of a ritual when I was there at the time when she would visit, and then we'd walk her back to 14th Street to take the train. And they would kiss goodbye, and I always loved that moment. And this is one of the photographs that I have several, but this is one of my favorites. And actually Paul Moakley, the curator, he wanted to add this photograph, and I had it hanging up at home. And you know, it was taken right off the wall and brought to the show. So and it's very precious to me. They meant a lot to me, and they're not with us any longer, so I'm very happy to have all the photographs that I do have of my family. I'd like to walk through the exhibit and talk about certain images. Actually, while we're here, and we're talking about the Lower East Side, and that's where that first photograph was taken, then I would like to talk about this one, which I call Forsyth Street Decorators. Actually, you could see that in the window of the storefront. It says Forsyth Street Decorators, and I kind of find that, you know, with how slick everything is today and how different New York is, it's almost like a little ironic, this kind of old storefront with the cracked glass and all the material in the front maybe slightly faded, and yet they're the decorators. And to me, it was much more interesting and intriguing for them to be the actual decorators. For myself personally, I'd much rather shop in a store like that to see what odds and ends I would find. It'd usually be a really interesting character who was the sales guy, or, you know, mom and pop. Anyway, it's really a throwback, and it makes me think of what New York was like at the time, especially how the Lower East Side is so different now, so slick and so trendy. So I'm very glad to have that, and we'll go on to some others. These are the black and white photographs from the exhibition, and they are taken from the 70s and 80s in New York, and they are in my new book called Sometimes Overwhelming, published by Powerhouse Books. And this came out this February 2008. And this is just a small selection of the photographs that you will see in this book. There are many from a New York that is pretty much disappeared. And it covers a lot of ground, which is what I like to do. I still like to do it. Like, for example, this is a photograph I took of a woman at Coney Island, probably 1970, let's see if I have them here, 76. I just saw her like that. I don't pose the people. I saw her and I went up and took a photograph of her. She was fine with it. And the same thing with this one. This is Reese Beach, Bay 1. There was a nude bay, and this Hasidim showed up at the nude bay. It was kind of like an apparition, seeing him all dressed in black with the hat and the hot summer heat, and everybody, the people are either nude or in their bathing suits swimming, and here he comes walking on the sand. And then this man who walked up and said, take my picture with him because I'm Jewish too. So I called the photograph the Jewish bodybuilder and the Hasid. And, you know, they asked me to take the picture. So a lot of the times it's like that. You know, you get out there and start photographing and you don't really know what's going to happen or what you're going to see, even though you may think you're going to a certain place, but the rest of it is all usually a big surprise. This woman is Isabel Croft, and I actually took this, I was still in school, and I was working in a work-study program and helping out Brooklyn Arts and Cultural Association, and Isabel was, she was also a photographer, but she was, I think they put her in the film they were making that day with the man who was in charge of it was Barry Cohen, who's still a friend. And she just started jumping rope, so I took that photograph, and that's one of my favorites as well. Each picture has a story. Each picture has a story, a location, and what happens with time passing by is that you get a nostalgic feeling and you become very sentimental about looking back and remembering the people, where you were, what you were doing, what was happening, and the changes, you know. And it's what I liked about photography, and I think the simplest thing that it was a way of capturing something to remember, or to remember the day, where I went, what I was doing, and what was there, and then it becomes a historic document. And if it's a good photograph, then it's even better. You know, it's something that's artistic as well. I'd like to speak then a little bit about the color work, which Paul and I decided on bittersweet for the title. And I used to live on East 14th Street for quite a while. And I was walking home, and these women were walking towards me, and I was drawn to them. I mean, I'm sure it was because as I look back, you know, their hairdos, and they look similar, they might be related, I don't know. And I just asked them if it was okay. Sometimes I ask, sometimes I just take a picture, but I think they're great. You know, their hair, and it's how perfect it is, and I don't know, to me it tells a story without me talking that much about it. And let's see, where you could see, you know, what these pictures are, and part of why we call it bittersweet, since life is both. And, you know, this one, actually, it's more frightening, but it's really somebody who was jumping off the light pole at Sheepshead Bay. That was the thing people did, a lot of the kids would do, you know, and the more daring ones climbed to the top of the light pole, and some others would just dive off the bridge itself into the bay in Sheepshead Bay. just call it homeless couple. I don't remember many details about this image, so sometimes I know the whole story, and they all do have their own story, but a young couple, lovers, homeless, sleeping on the street. This one, the dog, actually I took this after visiting here one day and walking. I love to come to Staten Island because it had its own personality. Even though it's one of the boroughs, it seemed to be like going in a time capsule, or, you know, more countrified. And I saw this dog on the way. When I look at it now, I would think if I saw this dog today, I would adopt him. These are, this picture was taken in Central Park. I was just walking through, and I saw these three musicians that appeared to be brothers, and they were just there playing their music. And I took a picture and kept walking. That's how that one went. I wanted to talk a little bit about this photograph that you see behind me. The woman's name is Candy, I remember that, and I remember her last name as well, but I don't have to give that one out. This was taken in the 80s, early 80s, maybe 1980 and 1982. I met her, and then I photographed her at her hotel. She lived in an SRO, which stood for single room occupancy. And then some months later, I was just walking through like the 20s on the east side, and I saw her with, I guess this gentleman was her boyfriend. And you know, I said hello to her, and then I just like kind of started taking some photographs of them together, and that's how I got that one. So things, as I said earlier, things work out in very peculiar ways, sometimes very unplanned, and that's the real magic of photography. This photograph I love very much in a, you know, as I said also, it's like the time that passes. And even my sister said, oh, you used to see that woman around the Lower East Side, and you know, there were these characters, and they were like fixtures in the neighborhood. You'd see them in different places, you'd see them walking by, and you know, it would be like, oh, you know, there they are. And it was kind of a nice familiar sight, even though, you know, she's a little unusual looking, but that was the charm of it. I found it charming anyway. And so I call her Matzah Woman because I have some vertical photographs where she was sitting on a bench that was near where my mother used to live, and she was eating matzah. And then I must have been leaving my mother's house, and I saw her, and I asked her if I could take a photograph, and I sat with her for a while, and I took a few, you know, with her eating the matzah. That's how come I remember that. That's that's how it got the title. But this is the image, the close-up one for me is really that's the one I think really says it. Whatever it is, it says it. Okay. These are my 3 books that I've published so far. I'll start with the most recent, Sometimes Overwhelming, where the work is on exhibit here at Alice Austen House. And the second book that I have is the one called Midnight. It's about my friend who I photographed for over 20 years, never intending to do a book about him, but I wound up documenting the life of a friend, a dear friend who suffers from schizophrenia. And it starts in 1984 and goes to 2003. And my very first book is called The Eternal Light. It's about the gospel choir Selwyn Rawls and the Eternal Light community singers, which I started to photograph and then began singing with about 4 months after photographing them. And it's the reason that I sing today is because of this experience. Thank you very much. I believe for every drop of